Listen, everybody. I'm Alex St. Iverson, and with me is James, no doubt, Dotson, and Greg, the mad scientist, Sharo. It is our fantasy football draft recap for the 360 Sports Network annual league. Guys, how do you feel about your teams?
Well, I feel pretty good about mine. Is there room for improvement? Most definitely. But looking at this, I've been through a lot of drafts, and this one felt better than some of my bad ones. Let's put it that way. So I can't say it was one of my worst.
Yeah, I'm the same way. My first two picks, I think I absolutely destroyed with my first two picks in the draft, and you're going to hear in a minute about some of the technical difficulties that go on when you have a draft and how that you got to be prepared for anything, but all in all, you make the best of any situation, and I'm very pleased with what I got.
There you go. Well, like in every draft, there's always situations, bad luck that happens. There's always that guy. So it was definitely a fantasy football draft for the ages. Anyway, Dawson, what was your draft strategy going into last night, and were you able to execute it the way you wanted to?
Well, I ended up getting the 9th pick out of 12 teams, and if I'm in the lower half of the draft, my draft strategy is almost guaranteed I'm going with the no running back strategy. My thought process is, unless one of the big names, the Lacy, Charles, or Le'Veon Bell make it to that 9th pick, there's no way in heck I'm going there. Usually I'm going to go probably wide out, and get the two of the studs there. However, I was absolutely shocked when Andrew Luck dropped all the way to the 9 spot. And in our league here that we have, all touchdowns are equal. So passing touchdowns were 6 more than 4, made me put a little more emphasis on the QB, which meant I needed to grab Andrew Luck right then, right there. So I got him. I got Odell Beckham in the 2nd round. And then, we had a little bit of fun after there because in the process of trying to read up a little bit more about Arian Foster, I tried to put him in my queue so I could get him later on in the draft so I didn't forget about him because he's only going to be gone half the year. In my process of trying to put him in my queue just so I didn't forget about him, I somehow hit the draft button. So taking Arian Foster round 3 wasn't exactly my plan, but I still think, though, that I end up with a solid team. I got a bunch of good wideouts. Like I said, Beckham, Matthews, Deshaun Jackson, Roddy White, I can play with them. And I got, with the no running back strategy, that means you have to get lots of running backs late, lots of guys who could be strong. So the Amir Abdullahs for me. I have both Rashad Jennings and Shane Vereen on the same team, Danny Woodheads, those type of players, and Niles Davis. I have lots of options, and that's what you need to do if you go with that no running back strategy. So I definitely am proud and happy with what I ended up with.
There you go. Yeah, I do remember how livid you were when you took Arian Foster, but you were going to draft him anyway. You just ended up drafting him earlier than you thought.
A lot earlier than what I thought. And what really got to me, though, was, okay, I took Foster, so, and that's the issue when you do an online draft, of course, but my thought process then, okay, I got to make sure, let's be smart about this and get Alfred Blue, because he's now a starter, and I can probably get him in round 9 until Greg, the mad scientist, yeah, you stole him out right from under me. Tell us about your team.
Well, yeah, and you know what? I think the most important thing that you stressed is that you stuck with your strategy. And a lot of people, when they hit that pothole in the road where all of a sudden, yeah, I just drafted a guy that's going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks. You start to, a lot of people start to lose focus, and they start to maybe change strategies, and that's the worst thing that you can do whenever you're drafting. I took a little bit different approach, although somewhat similar. Being that my draft position was 2nd, I had the luxury of basically going the all running back or trying to go running back centric. However, it was sort of a modified strategy on my part because I tried to put the value player into the whole perspective itself. So obviously my first pick was Eddie Lacy, which I think, other than Le'Veon Bell being out there, I still think Le'Veon Bell went way too soon, but that's another story for another day. Eddie Lacy, and then I followed up on my second pick with Randall Cobb. Now, once again, it's like, well, wait a second. He's not a running back. But when I'm looking at this thing here, I'm thinking there are a lot of running backs that we talked about in our running back podcast that are really, really good value players that I don't need to touch until, rounds 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So with that stated, I immediately switched to finding the best value player that can fit the role that I need. And I'm looking at, running back, quarterback, wide receiver. So I'm okay, fine. I filled one of my running back positions with Eddie Lacy. Who's next? I need a star wide receiver. Jordy Nelson was gone. Who's the next guy up? Randall Cobb. Okay, 1 and 1A. So I grabbed that, and of course, coming back around, going back to our podcast where we talked about the tight ends and how many good quality top-tier tight ends are there in the league. And I think we identified 4 top-tier tight ends. And with Gronkowski gone, which I believe you got, Alex, didn't you? You picked up Gronkowski, didn't you?
No, the person in front of me drafted him right when I wanted him. My top 3 would have been Antonio Brown, Jordy Nelson, and Rob Gronkowski.
That would have been insane. That would have been insane right there. But
I picked up Greg Olsen in my 3rd round.
And I like that pick. I know you're a little concerned about it, though, Greg.
Well, I was a little concerned because I thought the 3rd round may have been a little too soon for him. But, and this is the big but, the real bigger than my but, being that there are only a small handful of top-tier elite tight ends out there, and knowing that Gronkowski was gone, and knowing full well on round 3 as we're going back up the ladder again, these guys are not going to hang around. And that was true because Travis Kelce ended up going, I believe, in the 4th round. So with that stated, I think I picked him at the right place at the right time.
Well, I promise you he wouldn't have made it through that round because he was on my radar coming back through as well. And no, Kelce ended up going, end of the 3rd round. So, they were all long gone. Of course, Gronkowski, Olsen, Jimmy Graham, and Kelce all gone by the 3rd round, which is a little surprising, but I think it's showing the emphasis that people are putting and knowing that you can get QBs late. I was very surprised. Like I said, Luck making it to my spot, but even Peyton Manning lasting all the way to the 3rd round for you, Alex. So talk about your draft strategy.
Well, like I just said, if Rob Gronkowski was there, I was going to take Gronkowski. But, I was upset. I refocused, and I saw that Peyton Manning was available. Now, in our quarterback podcast the other week, we actually had quite a conversation about Peyton Manning. You weren't that high on him. I said you still got to account for him just because he is Peyton Manning. I had him in my top 5. So for me, it was a no-brainer. I thought taking Peyton Manning in the 3rd round just sounded too good to pass up. And considering I felt like, and I said this before, after the first few quarterbacks, there's no other quarterbacks I had to really go out and get till the later rounds. So I viewed Peyton Manning as an upper-tier quarterback. So to me, it was just the best player available. So I ended up with Peyton Manning. And as far as my strategy goes, I said in the other podcast, I'm going to put a heavy emphasis on my wide receivers. And that's exactly what I did. And I was really happy because even in some of my projections, there was times where I even put Antonio Brown and Dez Bryant in the top 3. And I got the number 7 overall pick. And when I saw that, I knew I had a very strong chance to get the player I wanted, and that was Antonio Brown. But to me, Antonio Brown, 3 or 4 overall pick, and I got him. So I was really pleased. And the Mad Scientist basically said it best. Jordy Nelson and Cobb are 1 and 1A. So come the 2nd round, I wanted to keep my wide receiver strong. I went with Jordy Nelson. So I'm very pleased that I was able to get 2 strong wide receivers there. I am kind of disappointed in my running backs, but I did know I did expect that to happen. I knew with the strategy I had, there weren't going to be many running backs for the take, and so I'm going to have to address that in free agency and maybe some trades. I'm going to have to make my running back game stronger.
Yeah, and you know what, Alex? You and I are kind of on the same page. We were going to put our emphasis on wide receivers over running backs. And the one thing I noticed about your team compared to mine is that, I mean, I don't think my running backs are any better than yours, at least on paper. But the fact of the matter is I have like 7 or 8 running backs that I can, kind of play it out a little bit and find ones that work. I think you only have 4 on your roster, and at least you have a couple who are going to start right away. For example, D'Angelo Williams, but he's only going to last for 2 weeks. So now you're really down to 3 running backs. So that is the only issue I would say with your strategy is that I would prefer, if you're going to do that, trying to get a lot of running backs late. But you also had the idea of taking a couple quarterbacks because of the risk factor of Peyton Manning. Is that right?
That is true. I mean, I've said in previous podcasts that when it comes to fantasy, I'm a risk taker. And I really, other than making sure my wide receivers are strong, the only other strategy I had was I was going to take risks if there weren't any players that I thought were going to stand out, basically. So I did take a risk on a lot of my players. I know D'Angelo Williams is only be there for a few games, but you know how the Steelers are. It seems like they're always plagued with injuries. So knowing how this works, I could see Bell getting hurt again in midseason, things like that. My tight end, Coby Fleener, my thought process was this: who's throwing him the ball? Andrew Luck. And some people think the running game for Indianapolis is going to be better this year. I do not. I don't think Gore is the answer. I basically think they're just going to be throwing it a good, 75% of the time. So for numbers, just the way their offense works, I expect Coby Fleener to give me a decent amount of points. Again, that might not happen, but he was an example of a risk I was willing to take on.
Well, let's talk about risk for a minute, because you definitely took one. In the 5th round, you took Seattle's defense. And this is kind of funny because right here in this room, we have 2 very different draft strategies. Alex took the first defense off the board, taking the Seahawks in the 5th round. Greg is the only team in the league who did not take a defense. So, gentlemen, explain your thought processes, because obviously different draft strategies work for different people. Greg, let's start with you. Why no defense?
Well, first of all, I was going to wait and draft my defense in the 15th round, as I normally have done in the past. However, as we were going through the irrelevant draft strategy, and looking at in the 15th round, I started looking at the value players again. And lo and behold, who do I see lurking without being picked up was Colin Kaepernick. And granted, Colin Kaepernick did not have a very good year last year. He had a ton of talent out there in San Francisco, but it just didn't click. But with the new coaching staff that's in place, and Kaepernick still being the starting quarterback out there, I'm like, wait a second. This would be really, really bad for me not to pick up Kaepernick. I have enough cannon fodder here, so to speak, where I could, let's say, sacrifice Perriman, for instance, a virtual unknown over in Baltimore, to pick up a defense. And then basically the way I play defenses are all situational based upon the matchup. Who's the strongest defense against the team that you're playing?
So you have no problem.
From week to week to week.
And that makes perfect sense, Greg. And I'm normally that way too. So I don't blame you at all, because you're right. You got a lot of quality players who went in the 14th, 15th round. Kaepernick, Alex, you took a risk on Winston because he could end up being big. I took Niall Davis because when he's gotten his playing time, he's been big. So there's lots of good players that you can get in that last round. There's no need to waste a defense that you might start for 1 week and then get rid of them for somebody else, especially if that's your strategy. Now, Alex, you're on the complete other end of the spectrum because you took Seattle in the 5th round. Explain it.
Okay, 2 things. Greg, I agree with your whole thought process on the defense. Any other defense but the Seahawks, I agree with that. The Seahawks, they're just so far ahead of any other defense. Turnovers, look at the talent on that team, on that defense. they're a defense that some days they could put up 27 points just for their turnovers. Now, most defenses, will give you like 3 points. And what do we always talk about? Know your league. And with our league, we automatically start out with 10 points on defense, and it can go up or down. You don't start at 0. So that's a big, big advantage for me, especially with the Seahawks defense.
And I agree. And you know what? And if that's your strategy, and you're going to stick with that strategy, you know what? That's a heck of a strategy. I was reminded by my son, who drafted as the Black Shadow, that, this is, he said, Dad, he says, I've won games based upon a defense scoring me 22 to 24 points.
That's what I'm saying. People always overlook that. I don't know why. For as long as I've been playing this game, it can make such a difference.
Right. But, at the same token, and I agree. But and I decided, well, it's like, what's the tone and tenor of my league going to be like this year? Am I going to, be defense-centric, or am I going to sit here and play the matchups? And invariably, one of the things I love to do is I always love to play the matchups and to see the best available defense against the weakest team out there. And invariably, you can, and that is what really makes the games of Oakland versus the Jets, really, really interesting is now that if I've got the Jets defense against Oakland, now with a fairly young quarterback at Oakland, this is what makes the games worth watching. These oddball matchups that may happen on a Thursday night or something like that. But nonetheless, I mean, it all depends. Stick with your strategy. If it works, use it.
And what I love here is with the three of us, you have Alex, who is really heavy on loving that defense, Greg, who has no problem in playing the matchups, and I'm pretty much right down the middle. The reason being, Alex, I completely agree with you, except that no matter what, somebody is going to take that Seahawks gamble well before I'm willing to. I wouldn't have gone before the 7th or 8th round probably for Seattle, even though they are that good. I'm just not going to risk taking them quite that high when there are other players who I would rather take ahead of them.
Well, also,
Greg?
remember for me, I wanted to make sure I get the players that I want. What I said, I wanted to make sure I got Antonio Brown. I wanted Rob Gronkowski. He got away from me. I mean, that's just my draft strategy. And also, special teams. If you have a player that gets a kick return touchdown, that's going to go for that defense's points. So if someone on the Seahawks defense returns a kick, or the Seahawks player returns a kick for a touchdown, and I don't have him, that's still points for me.
Yeah, exactly. So your thought process is you want to get a guy that you want. You had him on your radar. You didn't let him pass you. And that's pretty much the mentality that most NFL GMs have, which is fine. Now, Greg, on the other hand, he's willing to play the matchups each week. And a lot of people are going into that strategy, and I really enjoy that strategy. My only issue with it, though, Greg, is that of the 12 teams in our league, probably 10 of them are going to be playing that strategy. So there is a lot of times where you can have a great defense based on a matchup who's going to be on the waiver wire, and it is very unlikely that I'm going to be able to pick up that good defense every week. So it just makes it tough there. So the way I look at it, instead of A, possibly wasting waiver wire picks to get a defense, and B, having to battle and end up getting the best defense available, being the second stringers over in Oakland or something, my thought process is kind of in the middle, actually. I'm going to go not for the Tier 1 Seattle because they're going to go too early. I'm going to kind of focus and see maybe if I can get a team who I can trust to start on my lineup maybe 10 to 12 weeks out of the year that I'd have no problem starting them. A team like Buffalo, a team like Houston, a team like Arizona or St. Louis. If I can get one of those 4 teams in, say, round 9 or 10, that's where I'm looking to get, because then I know I can trust that I'm going to start them more weeks than not. But at the same time, I can still play the waiver wire game, and I'm not feeling like I've wasted a draft pick in the 5th, 6th, 7th round because of it. So I end up getting Arizona in the 10th round, and I'm great with that because Arizona plays well against Seattle, and that's really the only team in their division who's going to put up any meaningful points that could hurt them defensively. So I'm going to start Arizona for every division game and probably half of their other games. That's already 10 games right there. I'm happy with what I got. So I love how we have 3 very different strategies that are all going to work out, I think, very well for the 3 of us.
Right. And, in my philosophy is if your defense can get you 10 points or more, then that's all you need. Because if you're relying on your defense to score you a lot of points, that tells me you don't have a very strong rest of the lineup. So the defense is the icing on the cake, and as long as the defense can get me 10 points or more, I'm happy.
Right, and it depends on the league too. In our league, you cannot go negative in your defense. So you can, if he gives up 70 points, your defense, you're just at a goose egg. You got 0 points. There are some leagues, like the one league Alex and I are also in, where we've seen defenses get big time negative points, and that can end up hurting you as well. And if that's the case, I probably don't go as much with Greg's strategy in that one. But I mean, again, know your league. We say it every time, and here's the biggest example of it right there.
One thing I'd like to add to one draft strategy I have is sometimes towards the later rounds, I draft players that I could use as a bargaining chip. I had Peyton Manning, and I drafted Phillip Rivers in the late rounds. Phillip Rivers is a decent fantasy quarterback. There is going to be someone in our league that is going to be desperate for a quarterback, and I'm going to have a potential starting fantasy quarterback in Phillip Rivers that I'm going to be able to trade maybe for a decent running back for. So there were no decent running backs left, in my opinion. So instead of drafting a crappy running back, I go ahead and draft a great quarterback knowing that I'm going to be able to use him as a trade bargaining chip.
Oh, definitely. And if I didn't get Andrew Luck in the first round, I would have been looking for a guy like Rivers, say about the 10th round. So, and I know a couple people out there in our league who were looking to do that and probably got very frustrated when you took Phillip Rivers as your backup when they didn't even have a starter yet. I've seen that happen too many times, especially happening to me in some of my leagues. So that's definitely a good strategy, like you said. And one of the other things I wanted to point out real quick, too, was we talked about defenses. Of course, we got to talk about kickers then as well. You know me, I'm not drafting a kicker ever, but you guys each got some pretty solid kickers in, I believe, the 14th round. Again, probably because that you feel like you want to have somebody who you can trust all year. Is that correct?
Yeah, Greg.
Yeah. That's basically, that's why I drafted Prater as my kicker. Only because, first of all, he's going to be kicking for Detroit. Detroit puts up a lot of points on the board. They rely on their field goal kicker, especially in a lot of close games. Detroit is, their main goal is to get back into the playoffs again. And that's kind of the team image that I'm going after when I'm looking at a kicker. I was actually debating, do I draft Garrett Hartley? Do I draft Matt Prater? Where am I at with this? And I decided, well, I'm going to go with Prater because I've had him before, and he's pretty reliable.
Jason Hanson could be a fantasy starter in Detroit. I'm pretty sure Matt Prater can be a good one, good starter in Detroit as well. Alex, you got Bailey in the 14th round. Same idea?
If Sean Sweezum wouldn't have gotten hurt, I thought he'd be a great kicker to have. Honestly, I don't think kickers are that big a deal. Usually you don't draft one. To me, he was my second to last pick. I really was not invested in any of the players left. Usually, a lot of times in those last two rounds, you end up cutting those guys anyway. My thought process was, all right, who's the best kicker available? I'll get him. And my last overall pick was Jameis Winston. Again, he could end up being something special, or he'll end up being a bust, even though, he's probably going to end up having a crappy year. But, again, it was just kind of my thought process. My last two picks, might as well just draft a kicker and take another risk and use it for a bargaining tool if he gets hot. So,
yeah. Well, for me,
not too much to overthink that.
I look at the fact that, okay, I didn't take a kicker. I look at the guys who are still available in the free agency who I'm going to be able to pick up before week 1. Josh Brown, who puts up normally, it feels like 3 field goals a week for the Giants. Greg Zerlin, who kicks 1,000,000 50-yard field goals. Blair Walsh, same idea. Dan Carpenter has been very consistent last few years in Buffalo. So I have lots of guys who I have no problem picking up and putting right in my roster, and I didn't have to waste a draft pick where, I could go for a guy who could be really huge down the road. A guy like, for example, your Jameis Winston there, Alex, or a guy like who I picked in Niall Davis. There are a lot of great guys, as you can see here, who were picked in the last round. one of them could be a huge boom. And here's the thing: it's very possible that one of the guys who I picked in the third round could pull an Arian Foster type thing and get injured and get knocked out for the year. Okay, I'm going to drop him anyway. So then I pick up my kicker at that point. And that's the way I look at it. I've always been pretty successful with it, and I kind of stick to it. But I have no problem with the route you guys went either. All right, now let me ask you this question real quick. What is the best pick that you made on your team, and what is the worst pick you made on your team? Let's start with Greg.
Well, I think my best pick was my number one pick, Eddie Lacy. I mean, as we talked about, I mean, it doesn't happen very often when you get the 1 or 2 position. And, I mean, you can say, okay, well, Eddie Lacy was probably the best pick. But I actually, in thinking back here on this, probably a pick that might be a little bit better than Eddie Lacy. I'm going to go out kind of on a ledge here on this. I'm thinking, once again, if this guy pans out, which I think he is going to pan out, it's Martavius Bryant.
That's actually a really good pick. That's an amazing pick, actually.
And to see him where he was at, and to pick him, I think I picked him in the 7th round. I don't have the roster in front of me here on this, but
sixth round pick, and the 6th. Yep.
Yeah. To me, that was one of my better picks. Now, my worst pick, Perryman. And what was happening? I didn't put anything in the queue. All my players were picked, and my son's saying, "Dad, it's time for you to go." I'm like, "What? Oh my God!" And I'm on the clock, and I'm just quickly looking and researching, and the clock's just ticking. I'm just picking anybody. So,
right.
And then I realized, well, okay, this is cannon fodder here. But to pick him in the middle rounds, I was not really happy with. And of course, Perryman will probably be history here fairly soon.
Well. And that happens. That's the name of the game, whether it's an online draft, live draft, or a long-term draft over a couple weeks. You're going to have that thing happen. Now, let's go to Alex. What's your best pick? What's your worst pick?
My best pick, I would say, is my 3rd round pick, Peyton Manning. My worst pick, looking back at it, I would say Giovanni Bernard. I kind of wish I had that one back. At the time, I thought it was a good pick, but the more I think about it, the more I could have gotten someone better than him, I believe. As far as a pick I think could turn out working great for me, you guys might think I'm nuts, but I took Larry Fitzgerald. I think it was my 3rd last pick. And I just need him to have like a comeback player of the year season. And I feel like he has the talent, and he had such a bad year last year. I just kind of feel like it can't get any worse. So,
well,
you hope he doesn't.
I'm really hoping we could just have a little glimpse of Fitz there.
Yeah, I'm hoping that you're right, but
I don't, not so much, but I don't know.
Very true.
Well, think about it. If the Cardinals get their crap together, I mean, everyone will be firing on all cylinders. You think there? They just picked up Chris Johnson.
Yeah. Who knows? It's going to be interesting whether or not it's all about what Carson Palmer does. So I think it was worth the pick about 9th, 10th round because he could be a 3rd round quality if he's as good as we know he can be. But I kind of understand
here's the deal. Fitzgerald, he's a known entity in Carson Palmer's mind. You're Carson Palmer, you have Larry Fitzgerald. He's going to try and chuck some to him.
Carson Palmer is no Kurt Warner. If Kurt Warner were still young enough and viable enough, Fitzgerald would be viable and relevant. You need somebody out there like a Stafford toss the ball to a Larry Fitzgerald, a gunslinger out there like an Aaron Rodgers, or even somebody even as perhaps lame as Tom Brady. Carson Palmer just doesn't cut it. I mean, Alex Smith, I think, is a better quarterback than Carson Palmer.
Well, guy, also remember, Michael Floyd broke 3 fingers in his left hand. So Fitzgerald's going to be targeted even more, I think.
And, and that's true. And, so, I mean, it's a crapshoot out there. I mean, it's really hard to tell. But one of the things that an old timer told me once, go back to that Janet Jackson song, "What have you done for me lately?"
Exactly. That's what we got to figure out because, I mean, a lot of my picks are guys who have done things in the past, but, a couple of them are not as good last year as they've been in the past too. Like for example, obviously Arian Foster is going to be my worst pick because of where he came up. But if you look beyond that, I mean, Deshaun Jackson in the 5th round might be my worst pick, but he could end up being one of my best picks if he comes around like we know he can be. Rashad Jennings, not probably my best pick, but I handcuffed him with Vereen, so I don't feel bad about it. Percy Harvin maybe was a dumb pick, but at the same time, he can be the Percy Harvin of old as well. So all the picks that I really don't like as I look at my team could end up being huge, and that includes Arian Foster, who coming back halfway through the year could be, rested and absolutely on a tear at that point, or hopefully not tearing anything else in his body like he always tends to do. So I didn't care for any of those picks, but I'm not bad with them. But my favorite pick for sure is Kyle Rudolph in the 12th round. I think he's going to be a top 5 tight end this year, the way he's looked so far in a preseason and training camp. I don't know. I can't believe how low he's going in the draft, and I was ecstatic to get him at number 12.
Well, I think he's going so low because, number one, he had Tavares Jackson as his quarterback for the longest time, and he had some notoriety at that particular time. Now we have a healthy, well, he's always been healthy, but now we have a non-suspended Adrian Peterson back out there, which is going to give Kyle Rudolph a bit more looks out there. Plus, you have a pretty dynamic guy in Teddy Bridgewater at the helm up there, too, which really, really makes a big difference up there in Minnesota. So, yeah, you're going to see a little bit different Minnesota team, no doubt.
As far as my Fitzgerald pick, guys, remember, he caught 63 passes for 784 yards, and I got him as my third-to-last pick. And I'm expecting him to at least do a little better than that this year. So I think where I got him, I don't think it's too terrible, considering I think any other receiver that goes in the third-to-last round will be right around the same mark, I guess, for stats. So, I don't know, that's just my thinking.
All right, last question we'll ask before we sign off for the evening. Besides your team, which team in the league do you think ended up with the best draft? I'll start. I really think that the Black Shadow had a really good draft. Solid players at every position. Drew Brees at quarterback, Murray and Joique Bell as the running backs. You got Hopkins, Allen, Torrey Smith, and a couple good backups there. Kelsey, a top 5 running back, top 5 tight end, and Buffalo's defense, a top 5 defense. You got top 5s in almost every position. Is very solid to have, and I think all around that was, in my mind, the best team coming out of this draft.
I would have to agree with you on that there. I really loved Blake's pickup of DeAndre Hopkins when he picked him up. I thought, wow, that was really, really good, considering that he's like the main person right now down there in Houston, and tend to be overlooked by other wide receivers out there as well. And then, of course, Travis Kelce. And I think the reason why he chose Travis Kelce is he knew that I was after him. That's one of my favorite players.
Well, he listens to our cast. He knows what's going on. So I don't blame him, because we all know Kelce's a strong player to have.
Right. So, and then overall, and then. He put together a very solid team. Now, I did chide him a little bit. I said, why did you choose Buffalo in the 8th round? And he said, damn auto pick, Dad.
Well, hey, guess what? Buffalo's the top team in sacks every year, and usually the top 5 in turnovers each year.
Said, you know what? The way luck is, I said, that's not a bad pick overall. I said, so if that's going to be your garbage pick for the night, you're fine.
They're a good defense, and they gained Rex Ryan. I mean, you can't really argue that much, can you?
You really can't. No, you really can't. So I kind of have to give kudos. Even though I'm a little biased, and it's my son who's drafted. I do have to give a little bit of kudos to Blake on what he did there with the Black Shadow team. I also like how you drafted there, James. You rebounded quite nicely, and you put together a pretty value-centered team itself. And that's something when I was looking at my team and kind of comparing, and I know we draft very similarly, and we, compete very highly against each other here. And I saw what you put together, and I thought, that's a pretty solid team. So I really liked what you did there as well, as far as your strategy goes.
Oh, thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. Alex, I know you were telling me after the draft you really liked how the Steel Curtains team came out. The only thing I really don't like about it is in a touchdown-heavy league for passing quarterbacks, to have Russell Wilson isn't my favorite quarterback for this type of league, but obviously his running's going to help there. Running backs of Forte, Gurley, and LeGarrette Blount, 3 starting running backs on that team, very impressive. He stole Kelvin Benjamin from me, Brandon Marshall on that team, Colston. He's got Gronkowski. He's got the Rams defense. Again, a guy who's got top 5s in most of the positions out there. I thought that was another solid team that came out of the draft.
Yeah, and you just said you weren't that high on his quarterback. You could use someone like a Phillip Rivers, hint, especially with all those running backs you got there.
Oh, we already have the trades in the works, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure we'll be discussing that before too long.
But after I was telling Greg, I don't think there's really any team that I think is so far ahead of everybody else's. I think this is a pretty evenly dispersed league as far as talent on each team. But I think if I had to choose one, I really like the Pittsburgh Steelers. I know it's hard to say that name without laughing, but Calvin Johnson, Dez Bryant, Tony Romo. I like the Andre Ellington pick. I mean, I just think he has he has a team full of really a lot of stars. I think if that makes any sense. I just think. Mm-hmm.
Well, and you said it right there. The running backs, aren't the sexy picks, but they're starters. Alfred Morris, Lamar Miller, Andre Ellington. They're starters.
That's what I'm trying to say, and especially since this isn't. I think all of us feel like this isn't a league where we're going to need running backs the most. He has strong quarterbacks, strong wide receivers. And
a combo
running
pick.
Backs, they're not that great, but they're stars. Yeah. So if I had to pick one team, I'd probably go with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I even think NFL.com rated his team the best in the league, too, if that means anything.
Right. Well, you know what that means, though, because, somebody who is in this podcast was rated dead last. So you know what that means. But, those don't mean too much, Alex, because last year I was rated 11th out of 12 in my one league, and I ended up winning the league. So don't buy into the projections. Don't buy into the the draft recap stuff, because it's all about how the season plays out. And the draft is big, but obviously that's not everything. You got to go through the waiver wire. You got to play this year the entire way through to have the best team.
Right. Who got rated last in our league?
You.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were projected to go last. So, that about wraps it up here, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks again for tuning in to our 3SN Draft Recap Show. Whether you are projected to be near the top, like the Mad Scientist, at the bottom like the Saint, or somewhere in the middle like the Value Man, you can always come up with a championship team no matter where you end up. So, for the Saint and the Mad Scientist and myself, the Value Man, thanks for tuning in and have a pleasant evening.